Thank you everyone for joining us today. I'm really happy to have Danielle here with us this morning. I mean, not just a great person, but an incredible mind. So you're all in for a real treat.
Oh, thank you.
Well, it's true. I've had the pleasure of hearing you speak multiple times, and you never underwhelm. Truly amazing. But let's dive right into it, shall we? So, as we go about and we look at the world today, we see a lot of organizations, a lot of firms, a lot of companies trying to navigate AI. Mm-hmm. Danielle, in your perspective, what do you think these organizations want out of AI? What do you think they need out of AI?
Yeah, so I obviously come from a very specific corner of the legal ecosystem. So I lead our AI ML function within a big law firm. And obviously the dominant narrative in our industry right now is clients just want efficiency gain and speed gain on existing business lines, right? Which is great. And we all need to do that, and that's going to be a competitive necessity. But I think at the end of the day, when we're looking at this paradigm shift, what do clients really want? I think they want new value. And I actually think that is really the opportunity that we and everybody else in the ecosystem is going to be pursuing. So sure, there's the sort of element of the clients want the thing they've always wanted, right? Because let's face it, clients don't actually want AI. They may think they want AI, but it's not really what they want, right? They want the thing they've always wanted, which is faster, better, cheaper legal services. But beyond that, if you kind of move into the kind of first, second, third order effects, what they really want to do is they want to help their businesses better navigate the increasingly complex, interconnected, existential threat-filled world that we all face ourselves in. And so that's where they're looking for the new value. What does that mean concretely? It means new services. So it means tackling the problems that we haven't been able to tackle without this technology, and looking for kind of essentially new services for clients. So going beyond just the simple driving cost efficiency, driving speed in the existing framework.
So let me see if I understand what you're saying. So
Yeah.
Firms always want efficiency, right?
Always.
And AI is a great efficiency play, right? It can help you get more efficiency, better, faster, stronger. But you're saying if that's where you stop, you think you're missing the key differentiator that AI brings to today's market.
Exactly.
And that is new. You need to be doing something new, creating new value, that you can't just do something a little bit better. You need to go and do something brand new.
Exactly, and that applies equally to people practicing in-house or practicing in commercial law firms or practicing within another legal player. I think that the sort of dominant narrative right now is very natural. It's pretty much the same way that we as an industry have responded to every other technology shift that we've been on, and it's almost like a natural part of going through the hype wheel, right? At the top of the peak, and people have different views about things like the Gartner hype wheel or specific metrics around that. But I don't think it's controversial to say that when a new technology is introduced, there is that period of hype and excitement around the possibility of the technology, and then there is a sort of reality check when we get to crossing the chasm from opportunity versus implementation, right? And we're now as an industry trying to cross that chasm right now, because these models out of the box can do really impressive things, increasingly impressive things. So we've just saw OpenAI's latest series of models, the 1.0 series just dropped the other day, and now we're seeing this really interesting kind of inference capability, right? So if you've been tracking these models for some time, from say like the mid-2010s, we've been on this journey from words to sentences to paragraphs to fluency with GPT-5. Now we're kind of getting into the context, inference, action space as we're seeing these increasingly capable models, but also frameworks that you can orchestrate these models with, right? But as we've gone along this journey, we're kind of realizing there's actually going to be an awful amount of work. Should we ask maybe a few polling
go ahead.
questions?
Yeah. So who here is in legal? Okay.
Okay, so maybe a third.
Yeah, how about general technology?
Okay.
Everyone here on the Salesforce platform or Salesforce curious? Okay. All right.
Okay. Okay, that's really helpful. So I think, whatever industry you come from, whether it's legal, whether it's professional services, or in some knowledge industry, or a completely different sector altogether, you are going on a very similar journey. With very, very similar stages, and we've certainly learned a lot on ours, and I think the main thing that we've learned is just to really take a step back from the sort of day-to-day shifting landscape of technology, and always get back to the heart of what is our purpose as an organization. Our purpose is to create value for our clients. Where is that value going to come from? Technology will be an enabler, but ultimately it's about combining that technology with other elements of value. The really sophisticated players, including many of the clients that we work with who are putting these models into the world, they understand that technology is an enabler, but it's not really the thing. It's the combination of the technology with the expertise and with the data to solve specific problems, and that's really where the rubber hits the road on leveraging this stuff.
So let me dig into something you said a little bit earlier. So you talked about new, right? Like we want to identify new opportunities, new value, create new value. Can you give a couple of examples of, either where you see that possibility, or what Baker's doing today, what Baker McKenzie's doing today to make that a reality?
And actually, just for context as well, let me just kind of put on screen, it's probably going to be a little bit more for those in the back, but this is basically just kind of tracking these models and the parallel capability within legal, but within knowledge industries over time, right? And I think what is new and what kinds of new problems you can solve has been different at every single stage, right? So for instance, what I would call legal phase 1 of this technology, or knowledge industries phase 1, we were looking at the use of small models for things like e-discovery or contract review or M&A diligence, right? And there was a whole host of really successful technology players, but also legal service and other professional services players that put all of that stuff into the market, and we're seeing a lot of companies from that phase now to start to exit, right? What I'm calling legal phase 2 is this really dramatic increase in capability where we're going beyond these small models that can do application-specific things. We now have these very large models that in effect are really good at reading comprehension. Like, that's one way that I've described this to some of the partners in our firm that are not as sort of familiar with the technology and the terminology, is like, these models are just really, really good at reading comprehension, right? And that capability is incredibly powerful when you combine it with the right data sets and the right context, right, for decision making. And so at this point in time, what is new, it's basically repeating that general cocktail for different service lines to achieve very specific outcomes. And I can kind of give you a couple of examples from our service lines. So when GPT 3.5, well, actually, let me rewind further. When GPT 3 initially came back, my team and others in our industry were playing around with this kind of surprisingly fluent sentence paragraph level capability, right? So we were using it within some of our service lines. So let me give you one example, which is supply chain. Many of our clients face existential risks around understanding supply chain complexity and trying to hotspot different areas of risk. So it was a whole series of clients who experienced incredible pain around the Russia geopolitical conflict, who are also trying to plan around potential scenarios in China and Asia at large, right? And those clients are trying to, one, better understand their supply chains, and two, understand pockets of risk, and then three, go in there and mitigate that risk. And so we were actually leveraging GPT-3, combining it with another Google model called BERT to basically mine a bunch of internet data about client supply chains and then summarize that, and then that fed into certain service lines. So that was sort of our toe in the water on this sort of series of GPT models. But what we're doing right now with GPT-4 and other models is on a completely different level. Let me just flick through a couple of examples. So for one client, this is actually maybe 1.5, 2 years ago, when GPT-5 came out, we saw this opportunity to basically take playbooks that law firms, but also many clients around the world have. And these playbooks are kind of setting out different legal positions. It might also set out different policy positions. And to basically have these models run over the top over top of these playbooks and summarize response. So one example would be, we have a large client, technology client. We do employment work for them all over the world, 20 plus countries. There are various verticals of routine work that we do for them. So one would be, they have a lot of short-term employees, and we will get fairly frequent queries about, can we extend this employee in France or the UK or Australia or one of many other jurisdictions around the world, even as far-flung as Greece. And we noticed that we would be just repeatedly answering these kinds of queries. So what we did is we ran these models over our playbooks, and we effectively tuned them to respond to these queries with 100% accuracy. And the reason why we have such trust in these workflows is because all the model is doing is using the playbook material to respond to the query. And if the right material is not in the playbook, it will just surface that to the lawyer.
Let me ask one question, just for the people in the audience. So when you're doing this tuning, as you call it, are you training an LLM? Are you creating your own LLM? Are you fine tuning?
Yeah.
Do you need to go and have your own specific LLM, or are you using what's kind of generally available? What are your thoughts there?
So love that question. That is the question. And I think, so we're probably the biggest law firm in the world by many measures, but it is simply not credible for us to go out there and fine-tune our own foundation model, right? It's certainly far from reality for us to train our own model, right? And there have been other examples, like some of you guys might have seen Bloomberg GPT and other industry examples where specific firms have gone out there and sought to either fine-tune their model or build a model from scratch. And what we've seen from those experiments is oftentimes that model is going to underperform the best generalized model. So our perspective, and this is sort of like a large professional services firm perspective, is like, one, we're not a technology company. We're a service company. So our job is basically to leverage technology to sell the best services that solve our clients' problems and help them navigate risk and opportunity. So that's the first point. Second point is, there is so much that you can do leveraging these off-the-shelf models. And our sort of focus is really on that extremely low-lying, technically simple yet very high business ROI. And actually, let me just throw something else on screen, because I think this kind of brings it home. So this is actually a graph. I have a colleague who works at a company called Snorkel, which is sort of focused on kind of combining large models with data, basically, creating a data ecosystem. And the way, when GPT-3.5 first came out, we started to have a lot of conversations in the industry about, well, what exactly does fine-tuning mean? Or what is a domain-specific model? And really, the basic principle is, when you take a model like GPT-4, one of its peer models, out of the box, it's going to perform well at certain things that are fairly generic, and also certain things where it's really more of an exploratory case or a low accuracy case, right? But when you start to get into really complex domain-specific needs that our clients and probably your clients need too, and when you start getting into that domain of, this thing needs to be incredibly reliable, high accuracy or total accuracy, that's when you're going to have to combine the model with different things to calibrate in different ways. And so we like to talk about customizing models rather than fine-tuning, because fine-tuning is basically changing the whole structure or changing part of the structure of the model, right? We have no business doing that. We're not a technology company. We don't have that kind of expertise. But what we can do is we can leverage the off-the-shelf technology and the tooling to combine these models with different things, primarily data, primarily expertise, to solve different problems. And that's sort of what our focus is on right now. And then, of course, we have different technology partners that we work with to achieve certain things. So we build on the Salesforce platform for certain things. Not everything, but some things. We build on the Microsoft Azure tool set to do certain things. And then there are whole categories of activities, say for instance, productivity software, where we would never even dream of doing that DIY, right? Like that's the realm of your Copilot rollout. And actually one other kind of image that might be useful here. So this is sort of more applicable to legal services, professional services, but one of the things we often sort of remind about our clients, particularly at the very, very beginning of this paradigm shift, is AI is not one thing, right? I mean, it should be blatantly obvious, right? But I think it was a really hard thing to kind of get past, you know, the very beginning of this hype wheel. It's not one model, it's not one vendor, it's certainly not even one bucket of AI techniques. It's actually a much bigger continuum of technology advances that are penetrating our business and your business in different ways. And so what that looks like at the infrastructure level versus the productivity tooling, you know, the realm of the Microsoft to the Google type suite, to the multi-practice tool realm. So for instance, in legal, your big legal information platforms, your CLM providers, your e-discovery providers, they're just baking this stuff in, right? And so I think a lot of our decision making in that layer of the stack is going to be about what is best in class for specific applications. And it's not really until you get past all of those layers of market tooling that you get into this custom realm. And certainly for a business like Baker McKenzie, we would not touch with a 10-foot pole anything around contract redlining or some kind of horizontal type use case that's going to be useful for many firms. We're more focused in this custom layer on bespoke, client-specific, matter-specific stuff that's technically simple but very high business ROI.
Let's talk about that a little bit, because so new value, that's what we're after. And as you mentioned, you know, the LLM isn't the new value that you're creating.
Right.
That's not the thing. Why the focus on customization? What does customization give you?
Yep.
If everyone's using the same off-the-shelf LLMs, what does customization give you, you know, that allows you to maybe succeed or win?
So it gives you differentiation in a nutshell, right? So we are, just for illustration, we're probably the largest legal industry rollout of Copilot and Microsoft AI tooling at this point in our industry, but who cares, right? That's table stakes. Everyone's going to be using that, right? Every firm is going to be using that, right? So in a way, we're not talking about a tidal wave with this technology. We're talking about a rising tide, right? And everybody's got to stay above the tide. And there are certain things that are going to be incredibly easy, and then you've just got to move as an organization into the next layer of value. So I think for us, a lot of the services that we've sold historically are simply going to go to other players or are just not going to be useful anymore. And so we need to figure out, okay, what is the next layer of value we can add? Have any of you guys ever heard of the Jevons paradox by any chance? Okay, so it's a concept in economics. It sort of originated when looking at coal production, right? And the sort of initial economic thinking around coal production was, okay, well, if the cost of coal is going to go down, if the cost of that resource is going to go down, then everybody's spending on that resource is going to go down. Well, what happened? Cost of coal went down, usage of coal went up, right? So the economy sort of, if you look at the kind of use of all sorts of natural resources but other resources in our economy, if cost goes down, usage goes up, right? Because people think of more and better creative uses of the thing, right? And I think the same is going to be the case for legal services, but many other knowledge services, right? And we've already seen this in service lines that I'm getting involved in. So one is we were able to drive down the costs and increase the speed for certain things within our cybersecurity service line. What did the clients then do? They turned around and said, oh, now we have budget to solve all these other big risks that we'd sort of thrown to the side. Can we spend that budget to solve all those problems with you now, right? So I think the initial part of the hype wheel for law, but for many other industries, was, oh, cost for legal services is going to go down, legal spend is going to go down, maybe we won't even need lawyers, right? Cannot be further from the truth. My own instinct, I think a lot of other people's instincts in the industry, our demand is going to go up, because of course now we have something that can help us solve all these problems that our clients have dealing with, but haven't been solved before. And I think one of the really interesting parts about this paradigm shift is we have the problem advancing in tandem with the solution, right? The problem is, certainly in the legal industry, is legal complexity, right? And legal complexity is really just a reflection of increasing social, political, economic complexity. The world is increasingly multifaceted, complex, hard to predict, many foundational assumptions about the world order of our clients are being challenged, right? That is the sort of edge of chaos that they're living in right now, and that will increase. In parallel, we have this incredibly powerful technology that is helping us to better understand and parse out and navigate that complexity. So I think sort of the call to action for legal, but many other industries, is let's start to explore ways we can use this technology to navigate that complexity, and practically speaking, that means new services.
But we've got a few minutes left. Let's bring it home for folks. And by the way, I love when anyone talks about supply and demand.
Right.
Like that's amazing. That speaks to my my heart. But let's bring it home to folks. Is this theoretical, or are there actual real world use cases? 2 years ago, I think you saw a lot of people talking about LLMs and starting to understand the opportunity.
Yes.
But we're in a different world now where there's firms that are actually using these different technologies in very productive ways.
Yeah.
Can you bring it home to folks? Talk about 1 or 2 use cases that have excited you.
So let me talk about what we're doing in the cybersecurity space, because I think it's a good example. So the answer to your question is yes. I think the first part of this hype cycle, it was all theory. Now we're kind of going from theory to reality. I work in a business model where, we're not a VC firm. My practice team has had to be profitable from day one, right? This is not an investment. This has to be generating. It has to be a profit center, not a cost center, and that's sort of the theme of today's discussion. And so everything we do has to be in that high ROI, low input quadrant. And I think this is one really simple use case, but powerful use case that sort of illustrates there's so much you can do with your own businesses. So we help a bunch of clients around the world deal with cybersecurity incidents. And there are various buckets of work within that service line. But one area of work is when you're looking at the forensic data output from one of those incidents. And for many years, since the mid-2010s or so, we've had lots of different e-discovery and other vendors that have helped with that forensic PII identification piece. So in a nutshell, you experience a cyber incident. Let's identify what personal data is implicated in that incident, and then depending on the industry, you have a whole bunch of obligations to notify regulators about that event and to notify consumers about that event. So until now, what would happen in most service providers, certainly all of our peer firms do it this way now, is you get the data output from a tool like Relativity, one of their peers, and then you take your army of lawyers and you have them go line by line, row by row, and then triangulate against the legal position in each of the countries, right, to figure that out. We have playbooks that basically set out that position for, say, every one of the US 50 states or various other countries. And so what we can do now is, rather than have the lawyers do that sort of reasoning process, the models are extremely capable, right? So you create these workflows where you have the models look at the forensic PII output, look at the playbook, and triangulate and figure out, okay, which regulators do we need to notify? And even if you're dealing with, say, a 350,000 person event across all 50 states, that has traditionally been like a week of work by a handful of lawyers, right? Now what we've been able to do is compress that down to like a 2-3 minute output, which is sort of what our tool does within Baker McKenzie. And that is an incredibly simple, technically simple use case. The champion of that use case is the playbook that sets out the position. All you're doing is guiding the model to look at the output, look at the playbook, and make very straightforward conclusions, right? But that's replaced 30 plus hours of work. So one, that's an immediate speed and efficiency gain for the client. The speed is more important because in the not too distant past, if that takes you a week to do that work, you've missed the 24 to 48 deadline to disclose, right? So the client's in incredibly bad position from day one. So now the client satisfies the deadline, but more than that, they have the 24 to 48 hour window to actually think about their response. So now they know the position, they can think more strategically about their response, they can engage their PR team and various other people. And what we've found is that the client then says to us, oh great, now we know the position, can you do all this other work for us to figure out the strategy? And that work, of course, is sort of the higher level judgment piece. So that's a really nice example of technically simple, immediate speed and efficiency gain for the client, and in addition to that, new value, which is helping them figure.
That's what I feel like that brings it back.
Mm-hmm.
How you've actually created new value for the firm by applying AI and some of these new LLMs. I think that's lovely. I think we're at time. So I want to thank you, Danielle, for
Pleasure.
coming, and absolutely fantastic. I'm sure everyone agrees. Thank you so much.